find your voice? What do those words mean to you?
Well, I think everybody's different in terms of what their voice means to them. I mean, to me, I think finding your voice is being honest with whatever it is you're trying to put forward. Let me try and think and rephrase that a bit. I think finding your voice means being honest in your artwork. So whether it's a film, whether it's something that you're writing, I think if you're doing it from the heart and it's something that you truly love, then it's probably coming from your own voice. And I think that people have the tendency to lose their own voices when they start doing things for other people, or they start worrying what other people think. So for me, that's what finding my own voice is.
How has writing articles and essays helped you find your voice?
Well, I started as an opinion writer and an essayist by trade. That's how I made my living, really, for the last 20 years. Part of being an opinion writer is giving your opinion, which means you have to be upfront and honest about what your opinion is. And part of being an essayist is writing from your personal experiences. And so I think I've always felt very comfortable with sharing my experiences and sharing my voice. And I think the important part, if you're going to do that, is how you present it. I think you can share opinions and you can share your personal experiences, but you should try to get along with other people and be respectful to other people in doing those things. So, yeah.
How does one do that in this day and age, especially on social media, when if you're for one camp or the other, whatever camp that is, now you're in enemy territory?
Yeah, it's rough on social media sometimes. It is very divisive. People have the tendency to kind of go at it. And sometimes no matter what you say, you can say something like, I hope everybody has a good day, and somebody's going to be upset. I think it's important to not let those things get to you. Don't take them personal. My experience has been, social media is different from real life. In real life, I get along with everybody, and most people have a lot in common. And I think it's important to get away from the computer sometimes and get to know different types of people, have fun conversations. And social media is very performative. So sometimes people are leaving comments because they're trying to get likes, and there's this sort of incentive to be as extreme as possible. But I don't think it's real life. And I don't let it bother me, and I just recognize that it comes with the territory. And I'll bat it back and forth with people for fun, but I have my limits because I think healthy debate, healthy conversation is good. But I don't want to be somebody who is taking part in promoting contention or division necessarily.
And would you say you're more of a contrarian? You don't always follow groupthink?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think I've naturally always been a bit of a contrarian. I don't think I go out of my way and say, I'm just going to take a different stance on this. I just think I feel comfortable with kind of being myself, and sometimes I have the tendency to go against the grain by virtue of that. I've always been interested in, growing up, for example, my influences were always the outsider artists, the songwriters and the writers and the contrarians and essayists that I think took a different stance on things or viewed things differently, right? Whether we're talking about John Lennon or whether we're talking about Christopher Hitchens or George Orwell. I just have always gravitated toward those types of influences. So I'm sure that influenced me in some sort of way. But I think naturally, just personality-wise, I look at things a little bit different.
Sure, and not going along with the group can rub people the wrong way. Even if you're not saying anything, if they see that you're hanging back or you're not playing to politics, it can make people angry because you're not kissing up to whomever.
Sure. Yeah, well, I mean, it's, running a media company, for example, it can be difficult because you want people who want you to take a one-sided position on some things. And me being an opinion writer, it's my responsibility to put different voices forward, even ones that I disagree with, so we have different opinions that kind of cover the spectrum. And so I'm always going to have my own opinions, but I always try and welcome different perspectives and opinions onto our platform. And so I think that's how we've been able to stay afloat largely, by not necessarily caving to one side or the other, but simply creating a platform where people can share opinions and perspectives. And, in fact, Kenneth, who's been on Film Courage.
Right, Kenneth Castillo.
He wrote an essay for us a while back defending the urban genre of movies. And the reason he came to us was because he couldn't get anybody else to publish it. Because there was a movie that had come out, everybody was jumping on the movie saying that the urban genre was bad for film, it was coercive, it created all these stereotypes. And Kenneth, coming from that background of the urban genre film, felt comfortable coming to us because he knew we wouldn't censor him and that we would publish the column and just give him a voice to get that opinion out there. And those are the types of things that make me feel good. And that's what we do. So it was a contrarian take, but it was a popular column, and people wanted to hear that perspective.
Sure. And that's on Cella Media?
Yeah, that's on Daily Cella, yeah.
Daily Cella, I'm sorry, okay.
It was, the movie was The Tax Collector by David Ayer. So David had taken a beating for that movie by the media, and a lot of people were criticizing the urban genre. And Kenneth wanted to write a column defending the urban genre, and so he came to us for that.
You have a quote on your website, and that would be for BrandonLoranMaxwell.com. Never forget where you came from, because at the end of the day, when all of the cheap cocktails, plastic smiles, and paper credentials are stripped away, your roots are all you have. I love that.
Sure. Well, thank you.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really important to remember where you came from. I see, just in my own time, being in both media and now entertainment, I've seen a lot of people lose themselves. They get swept up in the lights or the accolades. They get swept up with having access to things that they didn't before. And I think they lose why they really were getting into the business sometimes. They lose sight of themselves. And I think it's important to be grounded in something if you're going to go into these worlds. I mean, Los Angeles will eat you up if you're not grounded in something, especially if you have a little bit of success, because everything's at your fingertips. And I think for me, because of how I grew up in my earlier life, my previous life, I think it made me more grounded as a person, because I feel comfortable going into these types of environments and not being tempted in the same way that I would have been in my 20s, because I've learned so much from my 20s, growing up so fast. So.
Right. Yeah, I remember Charles Bukowski said something. I'm going to clean up the quote because I can't say it, but the such and such came too late. You can research and fill in the gaps to what that is, but he felt that he, because he strived for success for so long, that when different things did come his way that were temptation, it was easier for him to resist. So.
Yeah, Charles Bukowski, I really like him as a writer. One of my favorite poems by him is called "The Genius of the Crowd." And I recommend everybody check out that poem because it talks about groupthink and the quote-unquote perceived genius of the crowd. And Bukowski himself was kind of an outsider.
He sure was, yeah. But you said it just in follow-up that LA can eat you up. It's also people can treat people differently. Having worked different jobs, I've seen celebrities come in places and people just act so weird around the person. They talk about the person like they're not even there, like they're not human. I've witnessed it on several occasions in the past. So it's also that. It's also there's a finger pointing and a hatred towards somebody that's quote unquote made it. Mm-hmm. And that also does a number on people too.
Yeah, and another thing that I try to do is, I don't really treat anybody different. Like I try to treat everybody the same. So whether or not it's somebody who's just a homeboy from the hood who's cleaning their car to go out cruising for the night, or whether or not it's some A-list producer, A-list director, I don't treat anybody different. They're just people, they're humans. And the truth is, and we saw this during COVID, all those things can go away like that. And then what do you have? So I think that's why I think it's so important to be grounded in something other than just the superficiality or the material things of this business. So as an artist, right, like you want to create for people because that's what you love. I mean, I'm an artist too, that's what I want to do. But I don't lose myself in that business. And whether or not I were having a film distributed or made, I'd still be doing it because that's what I love. So I don't need this. This is just extra, this is just extra fun on the side.
What is gatekeeping?
Well, I mean, gatekeeping probably means different things to different people. I think gatekeeping can mean not sharing information with people. You see that in the film industry, where controlling information gives you power, and it's what makes you different from people who don't have access to that information. That's why I like sites like Film Courage, because you're essentially bringing that down, that wall, and you're allowing people to share information with people. So there's that. There's gatekeeping that goes on where you have people who are already in positions of power who don't want to give opportunities to other people because that means to them in their minds that they're going to lose those opportunities. So there's limited opportunities. You have a lot of people trying to get their foot in the door, and so they keep it for themselves or their own network of people. And sometimes I think as filmmakers, it's on you to figure out a way to kick down that door. And sometimes that means sneaking in through the back or being very creative in the way that you do it. Because I think gatekeeping is probably not going to change.
I know you're a huge free speech advocate. Can you think of any narrative films? I know there's lots of documentary films about free speech, but any narrative films that are about free speech that you love?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't even expect you'd bring that up.
Oh, okay.
Off the top of my mind, I can't think of, a documentary film that's necessarily just centered around free speech, but I would argue that film in and of itself is free speech. That is, when it's done right and when it's the best, is when a filmmaker, again, is just being honest with themselves. If you look at Michael Moore, for example, all of his early documentary films, like Roger and Me, for example, that was free speech, him going out there and kind of challenging, this company and documenting, his journey along the way. He created a whole genre of films of people that did that. And, you would see things like the guy who made the McDonald's movie, where I forget what the movie was called.
Oh, Super Size Me?
Super Size
Me. Oh, yeah,
Me.
Morgan Spurlock.
Yeah, and all of these people that went out and shared these perspectives and this opinion, their opinions using free speech. So free speech is important because it makes art better, and it's, we wouldn't have had the civil rights movement without free speech. It was free speech that gave people the ability to go out and march in the streets, march in Selma, march in East LA, express their grievances and the problems that they had. And so, you see it with art and books, and you see it with film. And so I feel like free speech and film and the arts is just they're intertwined. And they have to be. And the purest art we get comes through that lens.
Do you think it's possible for an artist to lose their voice?
Yeah, I think that you lose your voice anytime you stop doing what you love. If you're not doing it because you love it, then you're probably losing your voice, because I feel like we are happiest as humans when we're using our voice, our own voice, and we're being pure with who we are. And so I'm sure there are people that they just do things for a check that they're unhappy with. And there's always going to be some part to every job where you have to make concessions, but that's different from losing your voice. Making concessions is just a part of trying to work with other people. But when you're doing things that you don't like or you're unhappy with just completely, then I feel like you're probably losing your voice.
Sure. We talked about musicians off camera, and so many musicians, it's the same set every night and everybody wants to hear them play.
Sure.
Whatever, Freebird or Stairway to Heaven or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm dating myself here, but, and I'm sure they're just like, oh, we got to play this one more time. They want to do something new and original, but the audience they want that experience of the song they hear on the radio.
Yeah, that would be tough. Even with me, having just toured 35 cities, and you're getting asked the same questions and you're kind of giving the same stump speech. And, I could imagine how that would wear on a musician, especially a musician that's been around a long time.
And this was for the Q&A?
Yeah, for the Q&A with the film, yeah.
And lastly, and then we'll move on to another section, but I understand Shermans March is one of your favorite documentaries,
yeah,
which is an awesome film. What is it about the film that you love so much?
Wow, you really did research on me if you knew that. I don't even remember writing about it or saying it anywhere, but I must have. Yeah, I love Shermans March, and more people should watch it. I think it's a brilliant film. I love it because here's this guy who sets out and his goal is to essentially make a film about Sherman's March and trek this territory. But along the way, you know, he's got really bad depression, and he's constantly thinking about nuclear war, and he decides to visit all friends and family and ex-girlfriends along the way, and the whole film becomes about him sort of ruminating about lost loves and nuclear war and all these other things except what he set out to make the film about. And in that process, it actually becomes a very pure film. It's like a journal. And I think that's great, because he just went where the film steered him. And so I love that film, yeah.